President Biden traveled to South Carolina today to lay out his economic agenda.
It's part of his administration's Investment in America tour. The president announced a major clean energy investment and spoke about policies he says have boosted manufacturing and created new jobs.
When you invest in our people, when you strengthen the middle class, we see stronger economic growth that benefits everybody. I've long said it's never been a good bet to bet against America. And I can honestly say I've never been more optimistic about America's future.
CBS News reporter Willie Inman is in the room watching President Biden as he speaks. Joins us now on the phone from West Columbia. Willie, tell us about, I guess, what we can't see. Who's in the crowd, how the president's being received, and what this is all really about.
Hey there, guys. Well, the president was introduced by Jim Clyburn, a representative from the state here in South Carolina, who was really key to the president's electoral success years ago. Remember, it was Clyburn's endorsement and Clyburn's push that helped Biden win here in South Carolina. And he talked about the investments in the state, broadband infrastructure, talked about the Inflation Reduction Act, also the infrastructure law that will help build infrastructure up across the state. And in the audience, you of course have us media folks here, reporters and producers and camera people, but there are people who work here at the factory that are gathered here, some local officials as well. I'd say it's a couple of hundred people that are seated right now, in my eyes view, that are here to hear what the president has to say. In terms of visiting here in South Carolina, a red state, will of course note, but at the same time, the president and administration officials have been fanning out across the country trying to promote this Bidenomics agenda. The president says, the Wall Street Journal called it as one that is helping America. But if you look at public polling, a lot of Americans aren't really seeing that progress. That's where you have the president here today, essentially touting what his plans and what his economic agenda has done for the country and will do for the country, especially here in South Carolina with this new announcement.
Well, Willie, listening in, this sounds a lot like a campaign speech. It is a campaign speech. Is that the reason they're doing this in South Carolina?
Yeah, it really does sound like a campaign speech. You're exactly right. It's an official White House event, but the president, we know he is up for re-election. He's running again for office. And one of the things I think is interesting is he talks about how much this will deliver for the people of South Carolina specifically. The White House has touted that this will bring 600 new jobs to South Carolina, 1,800 nationwide. This company in particular is a partnership between two companies here. Flex is the one hosting this. They're going to build these solar inverters. Basically, those little inverters sit at the bottom of a solar panel and change DC power to AC power. Officials were speaking about that earlier. And this is something that the president and the administration officials are trying to get out there. The White House pool, with a protective pool that follows reporters, that follows the president around, I should say. We're talking to some officials and asking them about poll numbers. Why haven't the poll numbers translated into success for the president in terms of getting this message out? And I think that's why you see him here in South Carolina, a state that's very important to him, to his electoral success years ago. Of course, the president talking in this red state, he mentioned a district, Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, some economic success coming to that district in particular in Georgia. And he said he'll be there for the groundbreaking, kind of joking and saying that Republicans are taking all the money for this, for their districts, but at the same time, not touting this economic agenda. So I think that's why you see him here in South Carolina, and why you're continuing to see those White House officials go out to these red states, Republican districts, to tout this Bidenomics, as they learned to call it. Of course, the president says the label came from the media, but he's really taken that label and tried to turn it around and turn it into a good thing for his economic message.
Willie, it's an interesting point you make. You know, any sitting president has the biggest megaphone in the country, so they can do presidential events anywhere, I guess, avoiding making it an official campaign stop because it comes with all sorts of rules and regulations. But it's interesting that the president's, I guess, doing a 20-state tour to tout the benefits of his administration's economic approach, despite the actual results from the infrastructure bill and others not really showing up in people's worlds and lives in a tangible way just yet. Where else will the president travel to, and how does the administration aim to make the point that things they've done have helped people, specifically in red states?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point you bring up, Errol, because this is something that the White House isn't necessarily shying away from. They get these questions all the time, but how they're handling it in terms of messaging is pushing forward and hosting these events across the country, South Carolina being the most recent event that the president is hosting. And I think we'll see more of these events, not only in red states, but blue states as well. We know the president, vice president, she's traveling today out west. They're touting their agenda because they can see the same poll numbers that we see, that Americans just aren't seeing the success. Infrastructure takes a long time to build. Broadband infrastructure in particular, that's something that I've reported on. It takes years, sometimes decades, to get those lines out. And the president committed to building out broadband infrastructure by the end of this decade. That's a really big goal. And I think that's why you have the president and other officials like the vice president, you have the first lady, you have the second gentleman, and other White House officials, cabinet secretaries in particular, going out all over the country and touting this agenda because they know that this is a way to not only talk about the successes of the administration, but try to break that barrier in terms of the messaging barrier that Americans just aren't seeing the progress just yet.
Willie James Inman in the room with the president. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Willie.
You bet.